Okay, number 33, evaluate the inverse cosine of negative 1/2. Again, this means if the cosine of theta is equal to negative 1/2, then what is theta? So first off, I should know my cosine values. I should know cosine of pi over 6, cosine of pi over 3, cosine of pi over 4, and then you also have the quadrantal angles. You also have 2 pi over 3, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, all these angles as reference angles in every quadrant. So out of these, I know cosine pi over 6 is equal to square root of 3 over 2. I know cosine pi over 3 is 1/2. I know cosine pi over 4 is 1 over square root of 2. So it's going to be something to do with 1/2. It's going to be something to do with a pi over 3. But let's take a look at the graph. And you need to use the graph as a basic understanding of where the inverse functions are defined. But then you need to be able to do these kind of quickly. So when I see cosine negative 1 of negative 1/2, ideally you would be able to go to cosine pi over 3 is 1/2 very quickly. Okay, it shouldn't take you a long time to get there. Then I need to consider the cosine curve. So the cosine curve at 0 is equal to 1. Then it comes down and goes back up to 1 at 2 pi. At pi, it's equal to negative 1. So the range of the cosine curve is from 1 to negative 1. The domain is infinite, negative infinity to infinity. So when we talk about inverses, again, we want to restrict that. So if we're going to restrict the domain, we want to make sure we cover the entire range. We're going to go from 0 over to pi, because that covers the entire range. So the inverse curve is going to have a range from 0 to pi. The original cosine function has a domain restriction from 0 to pi. So when I'm looking for where is cosine equal to negative 1/2, well, if I have one graph, so I'm going to go ahead and draw the 1/2 and the negative 1/2, and that's going to be right here. So instead of that being at pi over 3, we're going to see that at 2 pi over 3. So cosine inverse of negative 1/2 is equal to negative 2 pi over 3. Sorry, not negative 2 pi over 3, just 2 pi over 3. Don't know why I threw the negative in there. So at pi over 3, cosine's equal to 1/2. 2 pi over 3, cosine's equal to negative 1/2. So knowing that restriction from 0 to pi will help you answer your inverse cosine functions.